Alright, here's the 411, folks. Say some gangsta is dissing your fly girl. You just give him one of these.
Despite belonging to the lead girl of the Arc 5 Winter Season Bracelet collection, Melodious are somehow the least playable out of any of their decks. Lunalights, Wind Witches and Lurlusks all had a fair amount of time in the meta, whether you liked it or not, as well as a lot of modern support, but while Melodious got some interesting monsters right out the gate, the Archetype got completely left behind along with yugioh's relevancy in the show. This is a prime example of a deck that feels incomplete as opposed to repeatedly botched, which is not to say that it doesn't have its fair share of garbage, having originated as a 2014 anime character deck. To understand why this melody is not winning any Grammys, let's start off with Score the Melodious Diva, a level 2 light fairy with 200 attack and defense, which during damage calculation, if a Melodious monster you control battles an opponent's monster, lets you send this card from your hand to the graveyard to change that opponent's monster attack and defense to 0 until the end of this turn. While Boojins weren't exactly an active threat to the meta past 2014, the satisfaction of jump scaring the opponent with Crane during the battle phase was enough to warrant a couple archetypal honest clones at the time. This one does the job. It doesn't do anything else, but to be fair, this deck does have problems running over things on occasion, so it's kind of important to run. If you want to win a lot of your battles, you're gonna have to resort to screaming in your opponent's ear to break down their defenses. Sonata the Melodious Diva is a level 3 with 1200 attack and 1000 defense, and if you control a Melodious monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. While this special summon card is on the field, all fairy type monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense. It's the most basic ass archetypal swarming effect, again straight out of early Arc 5, with some additional semi-generic attack boosting, you know, in case you're running the Shizu beatdown variant. Again, nothing special going on here, but you gotta run it because it's more stats and field presence. You'll notice that the common theme with these monsters is that they're functional, but towards a pretty underwhelming purpose. Serenade the Melodious Diva is their first level 4 with 400 attack and 1900 defense, and it can be treated as 2 tributes for a tribute summon of a fairy monster. After this card is special summoned to your side of the field, you can normal summon 1 Melodious monster during your main phase this turn, in addition to your normal summon or set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. The tribute override effect was something that was already way out of style in anything not explicitly focused on tribute summoning, so while this deck does have 2 high-level main deck monsters, this is absolutely not how you're meant to go about making them. The extra normal summon applying only when it's special summoned is bad enough as it is, but it's extra funny knowing that there were barely any legit ways to actually special summon it within the archetype. Like, for instance, a level 8 monster you were meant to summon by tributing it. This is not a serenade, it's a diss track. Tam Tam the Melodious Diva has 1000 attack and 2000 defense, and if this card is special summoned while you control a Melodious monster, you can add 1 polymerization from your deck or graveyard to your hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard as fusion material for a fusion summon, you can target 1 Melodious monster you control, it loses 500 attack, and if it does, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Ugh, god. Okay, so yes, this archetype did not initially have its own fusion spell, which is not a bad thing by itself, but their way of searching the vanilla polymerization being annoyingly specific did not help the case very much. The deck is focused on the field presence of special summon monsters, so it's baffling that cards like these were not given many options to be put on the field within the archetype. Things were made slightly better with the Link monster, but even with it, this is still a debatable one-off at best. And what's with that burn effect, man? That's just embarrassing. Wait a minute. Oh, I fucking knew it! Soprano the Melodious Songstress has 1400 attack and defense, and when this card is special summoned, you can target 1 Melodious monster in your graveyard, except Soprano the Melodious Songstress, added to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. Once per turn, you can fusion summon 1 Melodious fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters you control as fusion materials, including this card. Well, at least this one comes with a semblance of recovery and play extension. To reiterate, this deck does not have enough ways of actively special summoning its monsters for any of these on-summon effects to be worth it unless they're really good. While this one is serviceable at best, you do need some extra options of going into your fusions as there's not much to work with. Be happy she doesn't need to have been special summoned in order to do that at least. Kanon the Melodious Diva has 1400 attack and 2000 defense, and if you control a Melodious monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon it once per turn this way. Once per turn, you can target 1 Melodious monster you control, change its battle position. Wow, I wonder if this is something they did in the anime. Oh no, flippin' way! She's worth running for the simple field presence, much like Sonata. The battle position change is something that was cute for locals back when the card came out, but now it's more likely to protect you by making the opponent offer an act of pity as opposed to actually defending from an attack. Run 3 for the first half of its effect. Solo the Melodious Songstress has 1600 attack and 1000 defense, and if your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Melodious monster from your deck, except Solo the Melodious Melodious Songstress. The summon condition makes it worthless on turn 1, and honestly, half the archetype is easier to put on the field for better effects, unless you're a fan of resorting to the Ojama Blue strategy of violently ramming into things to make your plays in main phase 2. It was okay back then, but it's barely worth it for field setup now, let alone anything else. If you're running it, it's for sure gonna stay solo. Aria the Melodious Diva has 1600 attack and 1200 defense, and while this special summon card is on the field, Melodious monsters you control cannot be targeted by card effects or be destroyed by battle. You're probably shocked by the sheer jumping quality between the previous cards and this, and while that's completely fair as this is an absurd amount of protection for your whole field on a single level 4, there is a very stupid trade-away. This is something I've made fun of the card for multiple times on the channel before, and now it's finally in the spotlight, so if it's not clear yet, Aria prevents targeting. All targeting, including your own. In an archetype where several support cards require you to target your monsters. And even though said cards aren't crucial to your playstyle, this also applies to any potentially useful generic effects that would target your monsters on the field, like Ties of the Brethren. It is some of the most confusingly designed support I've ever seen, especially since cards had come out before it that gave their archetype protection against the opponent's targeting only. Whether it was maliciousness or a typo, it doesn't matter that much in the end, as this is still one of the best cards in the archetype that you should absolutely max out on. It's honestly an art form to make an effect so simple cause so many conflicting feelings at once. It's like the most beautiful aria in the world being sung by Jar Jar Binks.
Listen to me, says voice.
Actually, let's not do this bit. Their last level 4 is Opera the Melodious Diva. It's got 2300 attack and 1000 defense, but it cannot attack the turn it's normal summoned or flip face up. If this card is sent to the graveyard as fusion material for a fusion summon, you can activate this effect. For the rest of this turn, Melodious monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. If you somehow couldn't tell yet that this is an anime archetype, here's a level 4 2k plus beater with a downside printed in 2015. The second effect that was added for the real game is appreciated, or it would be if it was any good whatsoever, as you tend to already have plenty of protection without the need to resort to this. The level 4s could have stopped at Aria, you know, this thing didn't need to happen. Their only level 5 is Elegy the Melodious Diva. She's got 2000 attack and 1200 defense, and while she's on the field, special summon Melodious monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. If this card was special summoned, all fairy type monsters you control gain 300 attack. In the case you're controlling both Elegy and Aria, your opponent has to put in some genuine effort to break your field, as the only thing that works is non-targeting, non-destruction removal. Or Exodium the Forbidden! While this lock is incredibly sturdy and Elegy is pretty simple to put on the field, it's also by far the best play the deck has access to. Sure, your field is under a whole lot of protection, but what else do you do? The Melodious beatdown game plan is not strong enough to get into motion before the opponent breaks the lock, and it's not like they have any other win conditions to rely on. There's no problem with these cards by themselves, it's just the issue of the deck feeling incomplete. Because of this, the lock poses as much threat to the opponent as a sign saying please don't hit me. At that point it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Much like Aria, it's a great card in a bad deck. Getting into the high levels, we first have the level 7 Chopina the Melodious Maestra. She's got 2300 attack and 1700 defense, and once per turn, you can target one light fairy monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You cannot activate non-light monster effects during the turn you activate this effect. What else do you think I'm planning to activate in a deck where I summon this card? What is this effect circumventing? Some crazy Sky Scourge combos? The card itself is standard for what we're used to at this point, as in it's a generic good thing effect that doesn't really propel the deck forward in any meaningful way. You run it because it's a Melodious Maestra, which is relevant to a minuscule degree, and that's about it. Similar situation as with Mozarta the Melodious Maestra, which is their last main deck monster. A level 8 with 2600 attack and 2000 defense, and the effect, once per turn you can special summon one light fairy monster from your hand. You cannot special summon other monsters the turn you activate this effect, except for light monsters. Curses, foiled again. And I was just considering all the Sid Health synergy. This one is marginally better than the last one, if anything just due to being a Valhalla on legs. On the other hand, Valhalla is more generic and doesn't require setup to hit the field, so if anything, you'll probably be using it to summon Mozarta in the first place. It's exactly this type of shit that made the CIA kill Mozart. Quick mention to Crystal Rose and Brilliant Rose, cards which I covered in my Gem Knight videos, as their support effects also apply to Melodious. However, unlike Gem Knights, Melodious have a miserable amount of ways to meaningfully interact with the graveyard, and the point of the name and stat copying effects is outclassed by their fusion spell. Brilliant Rose is good link material in a pinch, and that's about it. The Melodious mention in these effects is basically honorary. Their first fusion monster is Schuberta the Melodious Maestra. She's got 2400 attack and 2000 defense, requires 2 Melodious monsters as materials, and during either player's turn, you can target up to 3 cards in any graveyard, banish them, and if you do, this card gains 200 attack for each. This effect can only be used once while this card is face up on the field. What? I mean, I could excuse the effect if it was like a Neo Flamewell card or something, but this is just a 3k beater with extra steps. This was before the time when hand traps ruled the world, so it doesn't even negate the cards it banishes because they didn't deem it was necessary to put that in the effect. I guess it's nice that it's a quick effect, so in the best case scenario you could cause a bestial player to groan for a second because you delayed their field setup, even though you'll still lose by the end of the turn. You run it for a certain spell interaction we'll mention later, but otherwise it's just an underwhelming, weird mess of a card. Why did they make it like this? Was Schubert known to dig through people's trash for music inspiration? Bloom Diva, the Melodious Core, is another level 6 fusion, this one with 1000 attack and 2000 defense, requires 1 Melodious Maestro and 1 Melodious Monster, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, also you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. If this card battles a special summon monster, after damage calculation, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the difference between the original attack of that opponent's monster and this card, and if you do, destroy that opponent's monster. Well, this is alright honestly, especially for the time. It's a good amount of protection and easily takes out boss monsters along with dealing some burn damage in case they don't have any protection of their own. The fusion materials can be an issue given how unwieldy the Meister monsters are, and the Bloom Diva alone is far from a win condition, but a low attack reverse beater of sorts is actually welcome in this deck since they tend to have trouble running over things. Let's just not bring up how your archetypal attack boosts actively make this card worse because we gotta savor the small victories. Their last fusion monster is the level 7 Bloom Prima, the Melodious Core. It's got 1900 attack and 2000 defense, requires fusing 1 Maestro and 1 or more Melodious monsters, and it gains 300 attack for each fusion material used for its summon. This card can make a second attack during each battle phase. If this fusion summon card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 Melodious monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. First things first, you are not spending more than 2 materials on this thing for reasons that should be obvious by now. The battle effect is serviceable, I mean it hits the field with at least 2500 attack and swings twice, but so does Neos Knight and you don't see anyone singing his praises. The floating effect is a pleasant surprise given a total lack of it in the archetype, which is also kind of sad because one of the deck's most reasonable first turn plays involves letting this thing die or linking it away so you can fetch a more proactive monster from the graveyard. Sonata and Elegy can also turn this into a moderately heavy hitter, so feel free to run it. Their last monster is the Link 2, Bloom Harmonist, the Melodious Composer. It's got 1000 attack, points bottom left and bottom right, requires 2 fairy monsters, and if this card is link summoned, you can discard 1 card, special summon 2 Melodious monsters with different levels from your deck to your zone's discard points to in defense position. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this effect, except Melodious monsters. You can only use this effect of Bloom Harmonist, the Melodious Composer, once per turn. If a Melodious monster discard points to attacks, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. This is not so much the backbone of the deck as it is the entire skeleton. Any 2 Melodious monsters you put on the field result in the Elegy Aria combo along with a Link monster that turns them into Ancient Gears. The latter is not really important as it almost never matters, but the deck's strongest play is packaged neatly within the first effect and it's very difficult to imagine it consistently functioning today without it. One unfortunate situation you might find yourself in is that the opponent still manages to build an OTK's worth of damage by ramming their entire field into Harmonist who needs to stay in attack position, and you're probably not running Sanctuary in the Sky just to alleviate this. Anyway, run 3 because the deck plays completely off tempo without it. Going into the back row we have the normal spell First Movement Solo. If you control no monsters, special summon 1 level 4 or lower Melodious monster from your hand or deck. You can only activate 1 First Movement Solo per turn. You cannot special summon monsters during the turn you activate this card, except Melodious monsters. Melodious lives, if you will. This is as good as it gets when it comes to early setup, and it's the type of card a lot of decks would love to have. Sure, you're not kickstarting any super strong plays with it, but it special summons Aria and sometimes that's all you need. It's worthless if you're controlling any monsters, so don't max out on it, but it's good regardless. Their other normal spell is Ostinato, and it says, if you control no monsters... Again? Fusion summon 1 Melodious fusion monster from your extra deck, using 2 monsters from your hand and or deck as fusion material. During the end phase of this turn, destroy the monster fusion summoned by this effect, and if you do, if all the fusion materials that were used for its fusion summon are in your graveyard, you can special summon all of them. I get why the 0 monster restrictions are there, but man, you make 1 play with this deck and suddenly half your back row is bricks. This is their weird fusion spell that uses monsters straight from the deck, but blows up the end result if you didn't secure any protection by the end phase. The thing is, sometimes that's exactly what you want, as it lets you pick any 2 Melodious that will end up on the field at the end of the turn, which is yet another way to secure the Elegy Aria combo in case the Link play doesn't pan out. Depending on the rest of your hand, you can get a pretty large and sturdy field by employing this effect, with the unfortunate downside that it's composed exclusively of Melodious monsters. Composed. In case you don't need Schuberta or Prima to blow up on stage, Bloom Diva is a reasonable boss monster to sit on between Elegy and Aria. The card is an unconventional setup tool, but it's one you often need, so run 2 or 3. Their last spell is Fortissimo. It's a continuous spell that says, once per turn you can target one Melodious monster you control, it gains 800 attack until your next standby phase, even if this card leaves the field. You can send this card to the graveyard, fusion summon one Melodious fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters you control as fusion materials. Sure, it's worse than vanilla polymerization in every conceivable way other than a gimmicky attack boost that's also cancelled out by Aria. What, are you expecting a trade away? It stinks. Next track, please. Another quick mention, this time to the recently localized Kaiorei Getsu, which is an equip spell that says special summon one level 4 or lower fairy, spellcaster, winged beast, or beast warrior monster from your hand, and if you do, equip it with this card, then you can return all dragon monsters on the field to the hand. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there from the spell and trap zone this turn while face up, you can add one polymerization spell, or fusion parasite from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Wonders of Nature once per turn. This is one of those cards that must seem AI generated to people who haven't watched the anime. I myself would have found the reference kinda cute, but the inclusion of Fusion Parasite in this very celebratory artwork in effect is about as pleasant as the Paz Spirit in Smash Ultimate coming equipped with a bomb. The card itself is neat, nothing too special, but the simple field building fits in the current iteration of the deck, and it bounces back Bestials. Have we found the definitive rogue deck of the year? The search is pretty slow, but it's nice to have something to start a backup play with in case your field gets broken. Overall, I give it a pair of high fives. The last verse of this song comes in the form of the trap card Melodious Illusion. Its effect says, target one Melodious monster you control. This turn, that face-up monster you control is unaffected by your opponent's spell and trap effects, and it can make a second attack during each battle phase. Whatever, a crappy unsearchable anime trap, but did they have the artwork of this targeting card feature the monster that prevents effect targeting? Oh, that's a classic blunder. Now, I'm no music critic, but I do believe I'm qualified to review this melody. Consistency gets a 3. The one thing you want to be doing is available to you more often than it's not. Regardless of the lack of searching and easily getting interrupted, quick and simple field swarming is not an issue. Power gets a weak 3. All the attack boosting going on does make overall values in the field higher than you'd expect, but it's not enough to compete with actual beatdown decks, let alone OTKs. Plus, there is almost no removal to speak of. Recovery is present in the few cards they have that activate if your field is empty, you can recycle your graveyard on occasion, and making Harmonist again after a wipeout can easily reset the combo. I'm feeling generous enough to give this a 2. The protection, on the other hand, is the very elusive 4. With a flick of the wrist, the deck suddenly has its entire field covered in complete immunity from targeting and destruction. It can still make some modern decks have to put in the effort to break through the barrier, and if the Archetype's other plays were any good, this would be a legitimate problem to deal with. That said, none of its other plays are good, which is why the versatility gets a 1. The deck does not do anything. It puts up some protection and then hopes to swing for damage sometimes. It is the Yu-Gi-Oh equivalent of a middle schooler on COD running around with a riot shield and then screaming bloody murder when they lose to somebody who knows how to deal with it. If you are mad at this comparison, consider the fact that you've seen yourself in it. And here's the lyrics. Are you annoyed yet by all these musical allegories? Too bad, I got some more in me. There's not much to say here other than, wow, this could probably do with some support by now. As to why it hasn't happened yet, who knows, maybe they're scared of the lock being too obnoxious, or they just can't be asked to come up with a consistent game plan for the deck. The cutesy music theme has also been done better in archetypes with a similar aesthetic, such as Trickstars and even Sulfachord, so they don't even have that going for them anymore. All the Bracelet Gold decks had potential from their initial outing, but for some reason Konami decided this is the one among them that needs to be left in the dirt. They don't really have an incentive to try and salvage this deck, but it just feels weird to leave this symphony without a climax. I told you I had one more in me!
Thank you all for coming tonight. Myself and my close personal friend, Twin Longrod's very happy to have you here. We're going to subject you to a few of our musical stylings. This is a little ditty I came up with myself. Earth Angel, Earth Angel, will you be lying? My darling dear, love you all the line. I'm just a fool. You know, feel free to harmonize over there instead of just breathing. Earth Angel. It's impossible to work with some people. Earth Angel.